Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hidden Pearls podcast. My name is Emma Kittle Ponce, and I am joined with my father, Coach Kittle, and also the one and only Bob Taylor. So, Bob, thank you for joining us again for part two. In part one, we just felt very aligned with your mission, with your energy, both in helping veterans, but also just the space that you exist in with the mental health world. Yes, that is his book. Bob is the author of From Service to Success. And just in reading the book and connecting with you, we felt there were so many overlaps in your mission and just how you show up in life. And we're very excited to have you back on for part two because we could not just cover this in an hour. So to have you back on and dive a little bit more deeply into those practices of your book and how people can really apply those. So Bob Taylor, welcome back to the Hidden Pearls podcast.
Well, Emma, thank you. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be back. It's my honor. And I have to tell you, I really enjoyed the time that we had during the last recording. And I just really felt comfortable. And you guys did a great job of giving me a warm welcome and making me comfortable throughout the whole thing. So I really enjoyed it. And I'm very happy to be back.
All right. And not to note, we don't have to go into it too much, but in the midst of a bit of chaos in your life. So we're really grateful because we set this up and then you ended up listing your house and it got sold and now you're moving and there's a lot going on for you. So we really appreciate you holding on to the date for us and letting us get this in. So thank you very much. So that's really good. So, all right. Well, there were some pieces, and I guess what I want to do is just spend a minute, a couple of the core concepts that we talked about. So we went through your background, military history, and those kind of things. And I would encourage that. I re-listened to the show. And again, for those, we're actually recording this one on the same day it posted live. So hopefully everybody's going to have a chance to review that, and just thought it was great. So a couple of things in the process toward moving toward healing. And I'm just going to, and that's it, from service to success. And everybody's going to define that a little bit differently. But I'm going to list just two or three of these concepts that we talked about. If there's anything you want to revisit, we sure can, but then just kind of move into some of the things about the book. But so one of the ones that really stuck with me was this notion about self-awareness. And that's kind of noticing the things that we notice. And that's really, we talked about that, is when you get kind of pulled into the molasses or the gray or that kind of depressive, dark spaces, sometimes we don't always see that. And when we can start to be aware that we're having these feelings and emotions or we're thinking these thoughts, it at least provides a foothold for us to start making some changes. So I think that was one thing. And we talked about that at pretty good length. Just being aware of how we're responding to others and engaging in that. The other one that I thought you mentioned, and we talk with our vets all the time about this, is that our thoughts can lie to us. And so we always tell folks, thoughts are just thoughts, emotions are just emotions. They're not right or wrong. They just come to us because the mind just kicks that stuff out. And so we don't always have to believe our thoughts, and often they are misleading. So we want to kind of like, just because it comes into your head doesn't mean it's right. So kind of just separating, thoughts coming from some other, and here I am trying to interpret. So I thought that was a great conversation. The other one, and this kind of gets us into the MDMA trip that you shared with us. And again, I thought that was a really profound conversation. And I think for you to share that in the context with our audience was super powerful. So I really am grateful about that. You talked a little bit about this, but I know the MDMA trip really brought this forth. So this notion of forgiveness, particularly self-forgiveness for either omissions that we didn't do, things we did do, things we said or should have said, and all those kind of things. And I would really encourage people to go back and to listen, particularly to that part of the show as you went through that and how powerful the notion of forgiveness is for you, or was, and I think still is, and then also the role that MDMA played for you within that context. So those were three real core themes for us. Now, interestingly, so we were chatting before the show recorded. So in the time since the last show, I had my own little MDMA journey. So I'm just going to kind of pop that out there. And Bob encouraged me to kind of share that. So mine was a little bit different, and again, I've never been diagnosed with PTSD. I haven't served in the military in that kind of way. I can be a little bit, is moody fair, Em? I don't know. I've had elements over the years where I've been a little bit out on the edge. So I do pretty well by myself on the edge of a forest for long periods of time. So anyway, we could sure kind of talk about that. But I guess I just want to suggest to people, I think I had the exact trip that I needed to have at that time, and all those kind of things, and still kind of unpacking all the things that kind of I experienced within that, but it was all good in all those kind of ways. I was a little bit I guess when I was done with it, I had expectations that it was to be more similar to some of the veterans experiences that I talked to, and yours included, Bob, and mine was really a lot different than that. So I guess just, people can kind of prep and make sure you're working with a good professional and all those kind of things. So I thought all those things were really good. So I think that's kind of some of the stuff that we've been through. And then your book has a lot of other pieces in there, but I'm going to just take a pause. If there's anything I've summarized, either Emma, because you've been on there with all that kind of stuff too, and or Bob, if there's anything you want to touch on that we hit last time, and or as I've summarized, want to correct or add to it, I want to give you an opportunity to do that before we kind of move into some of the other bullet points of your book on healing and moving forward.
I'll just reflect a little bit on the self-awareness aspect. It is, and it kind of is it's related to thoughts can lie to you.
Right.
So I describe my depression as feeling like I was kind of surrounded by molasses. Everything was slower, harder, duller, less interesting. Wasn't that I was sad. It was just life was more difficult. And then the other thing that went along with that was the irritability. So I described that like, that annoying person that you run into just says the wrong thing at the wrong time. But then all of a sudden, what if everyone around you is that annoying person that says the wrong thing at the wrong time? And so, those are the thoughts and feelings that can lie to you, right? I wasn't really in molasses, and all the relationships weren't thorny. It was my perception of them. And so one of the greatest gifts that I received from my therapist at the VA was a tool that allowed me to start recognizing, if at the bottom of the funnel is where the worst explosive behavior happened, what happened just before that? And what happened just before that? And so the whole treatment, the whole part of healing was just taking one step at a time, one small step into learning about what was going on around you and paying more and more attention so that it put the control of my life back in my own hands. And so that's all I would reflect on, is that self-awareness and thoughts can lie to you are almost related, because when you're deep down in that depression and that irritability, you believe it.
Right.
You thoroughly believe that everyone is kind of doing things just to be you know an irritant or bothersome. And I've shared that, it took me 16 years of dealing with that. And then when I came to my sleep deprivation and my crisis at that time, that's when I finally went to get help. I really, I had a lot of regrets that I give a lot of speeches. I go out and I've talked to a number of groups, and I share that, you know, I have this regret that I waited so long. And when we need help, and in the veteran community, we try and soldier through, and we just try to grind it out. But when we don't get help, we actually become the problem, you know, and we're hardest on the people that we love the most. So it kind of made me smile when you asked Emma if you were on the edge sometimes, because, it is our family that sees us in our, in our truest form sometimes, or our worst form. But I just think that a lot of the healing starts with becoming aware of where you really are and putting more and more of that control of your life back in your own hands, and start to think critically about, well, when someone said something to me, did they really mean what I thought they meant? And you really have to, that's cognitive behavior therapy. You really have to start, they say, take your thoughts to trial. and you
Yeah.
really kind of prosecute them to to start thinking like, oh, you know what? Uh, it's possible that that person really wasn't trying to set me off, and my being set off was completely on my own, um, just my own thinking.
I think it's really interesting, like, reflecting on this in the sense that, I always think, like, it's a lot easier to not be so aware of these things, and it's a lot easier to just unplug and to not look in the mirror sometimes, or to really take accountability for the way that we are being reactive, or the way that we might be walking directly into a thorn field, or, and being a little aware of those things. But um when you were so I guess I just want to say, as you're going on your healing journey, it's not always like, I think people have this idea that healing is going to be easy right off the bat, and it's not, because it means facing a lot of the issues that we have normalized in our life. And it means that we have to kind of peel back these layers and say, wait a second, it's not okay when I yell. It's not okay when I react this way. It's not okay when I shut down. And like we were saying, if Bruce wants to go and live in the woods and live in a cave, then it could be okay. You can go out there and you can do that. But when you come back and when you're with your family and when you're with these people who need you in certain ways, it's not okay to be that way. And I think that's the beautiful thing about family and this concept of unconditional love, is that we give and we give and we give, but at some point it's taking that healing back. And I guess, Bob, or go ahead.
Yeah. So there's two things that I'll say about that. So there's the one side of the spectrum where you say it's not okay. Okay. So that's kind of dealing with the worst aspects of a person. But if you kind of push it to the other side of the spectrum, is what life can be like if, and that's what my MDMA experience helped me to understand is, wow, it's not only the absence of being an irritable, depressed person, it's the unbelievable experience that you can have in almost a newly fashioned life. And again, as I talk to other veterans and other groups, I remind people, look, when you went into the military, whether it's officers training, basic training, advanced training, not easy. Navigator for me, hard work. Um, going to going into combat missions, hard work. Uh, everything that we did, none of it was just easy
Right.
peasy. And so when we get out, we cannot expect that things are going to be easy. And so getting into the VA, not easy. You have to work at it.
Right.
Getting into therapy, doing the work, just like Emma said, this stuff, it's not natural. Challenging your thoughts is not a natural kind of easy process. It's something that you have to practice. I can remember, um, I don't know how many times I would go into the VA and explain to my therapist, I just don't understand this part of it. And she would walk me. It was only after, I'd say, probably 5 or 6 sessions of practicing these things and doing the exercises that she asked me to do that I really started to get it. And so I think, Emma, though, that's a really valid point, is you have to be, um, first, understand that you're not just stopping the pain. The healing process leads to something phenomenal, and a new level of joy and happiness, and a new type of relationship with the people that you love. Because when you eliminate the pain that exists in a relationship and you replace that with joy, it's completely different than what you've experienced. And so I just want people to understand that that is possible. You can go from just kind of getting through the day with your family or your loved one, you can go from that to waking up excited about spending the day and experiencing life with that person. And so understanding that, what is it worth to you? How much work do you want to do to get there?
Bruce has raised us in like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and the Matrix and all of these stories. And what he always reminds us is that like the greatest treasure that we seek lies in the cave we like least wish to enter. Or, I know I'm not smoothing it out that way. What the greatest treasure?
The treasure we seek the most. The treasure we seek the most lies in the cave that we
Right.
most fear.
And so I think when I think about that, sometimes it's always like, I want to get something, like I want this job, or I want this level of success, or I want to attain this goal. But at the same time, I think it's so much more like, now that I do this one-on-one client work, I find that it's so much more about that inner peace and calm and healing, and that you have to go through these dragons to get to it. And like the path to peace is not always peaceful mentally and emotionally in that way. But Bob, when you were talking about the healing funnel, were there certain parts of that funnel that you kept coming back to, that you were like, this is always something that I notice in myself, or this is always a pattern, or this is always a, not necessarily like a trigger, but like something that you were like, that you found that was like, this is
Yeah,
gonna.
I still see things. I still see things when, I worked in a foundry when I was in my formidable years, my early 20s. And the F-bomb was just such a part of the vocabulary, and that's deep in my subconscious. And so when I get stressed and when I kind of like get way down in that funnel, I'll start dropping the F-bomb. And it's a consistent warning signal to me to step back and don't be lazy. Don't let it happen. And then, then I'll start to take the next step and the next step and the next step. So there are signals that I can watch for. And hopefully, I don't have to go all the way down there. But there are repeating things that I can see about myself that tells me I'm headed back there. So one of them, Emma, is being under stress. Okay. We're not meant to live under a great deal of stress for an extended period of time. Sometimes stress is good. That came out in officers training school and in my military experience. Sometimes stress is good. It heightens your awareness. It helps you do things that you normally wouldn't do. But our bodies aren't conditioned to be under stress for a long period of time. And so that's one of the things that we have to watch for. And something that my wife and I have worked on is, so when I'm under stress, I'm not always the most pleasant, wonderful person. And we've kind of started to grow in our relationship so that she doesn't take it personal. She looks at it like, oh, you're under stress. What can we do to kind of change the circumstances? So it's more of a team approach versus it's just my demon. So I think we're especially we sold our house, we're moving, we're under this huge tight timeline. I had about a 30 item punch list that had to be done. And it's just every day waking up to the same thing and barely getting it done. I call it the George Jetson, Jane Stop This Crazy thing.
Yep.
Younger people probably don't know that as well.
I grew up with that one. I know that one, Bob. Yeah.
So it's just, being aware that you're in that stress. And so the caution flags have to be up, and that you cannot be lazy and just go with your typical kind of your less than ideal behavior, right? You have to be cautious, more more, throw in some more loving type of behaviors, say things, fake it if you have to, just kind of be careful about the environment that
So
you're in.
when you're in those, like, is there something that you immediately go to or that you do? And I think sometimes it can be like turning to your wife and being like, I'm in it. I'm in it.
Well, I think it's, part of the process is that it's a learning process for both of us, right? In that MDMA experience and the level of our relationship that we reached after that really told us that we have something great and it's really worthwhile and we don't want to lose it and we want to keep working for it. So I think we're isn't that awesome? And so now we still mess up. We still have our moments, but we're more forgiving, more quickly, and we're more supportive of how to, hey, we're heading in a direction and we don't like being there. So what do we do? So I think you asked me what are the steps. I think communication is one of the steps. Is to say, hey, I am maxed out today. I am not. And to her, that really helps. When I told her the other day, I said, I don't even like myself. So, I can't expect you to like me if I don't even like myself. I'm just really having a tough day. And that's a different thing than just being an
Yeah.
ogre, and just yipping and biting at everyone around you. When people know you're having a tough day, it kind of brings in the empathy and support. So
Right.
communication is the
It's
step.
hard on this side too. Like, and I'm going to say that to you. So, like I'm struggling. It's a hard thing. And like, we're going to make it through this together, but I'm just letting you know right now that whatever XYZ is, but let somebody know that. So the acknowledgement, and, we talked about this last time between journaling and then the verbalization of some of this stuff. I think I found that in my relationship with Jan is, when we verbalize some of these things, it kind of takes the power out and it also gives you permission to talk about them. So this whole notion about communicating, so like, don't hold it in. So, I won't go into my deals, but like when I say out loud to her, this is what's happening right now. I'm working on it. I'm trying not to be a complete dickhead, but whatever. And then she, okay, thank you for telling me and XYZ. And we've gotten pretty good at when you do X, it makes me feel Y, and that's a problem for me. Is this what you intend? All that kind of stuff. So
It's
I think
all
the
just
communication,
letting that pressure out of the vessel, right? It's kind of deflating the balloon a little bit at a time so it
it's like
doesn't pop.
we're a pot of boiling water on the stove. And like when you communicate, you take the lid off, it lets all that heat out and it turns down the flame just by having the conversation a little bit. It doesn't fix it. Things are still not perfect, but it sure helps. So, let's see. I want to you touched on a lot. I'm not going to go into this, but for our listeners, I just wanted to, so the self-awareness thing, we talk a lot about sometimes visualizing, like drifting above yourself and watching yourself as like a movie and what's going on and paying attention to how you're engaging the world. And then when we do work with people, it's a lot about how do you want to show up with your family? I want to be, here's 3 traits or characteristics I want. And if you know how you do want to show up and then you're self-aware, like, oh, I'm slipping, well, then you have a clear vision of who you want to be in that moment. And so it gives you something to stand on. So we do talk about some of those kind of things. I heard a meditation. It was one of these. I just want to flip it out there. I'm going to do one. And the Mindful Monday this week was there is no stress. And if you haven't listened to it, but I listened to somebody and they were talking about like in the world naturally, like, okay, but organically in the world, right? There, stress doesn't exist outside of humans. And I think animals can, like if somebody's hunting me and shooting at me and shit, but like generally it doesn't exist. It's created by organic, organisms that live on the planet.
Right.
But in nature itself, there is no stress. And
Yeah,
so,
I absolutely put myself into this stress.
right. And so if there is no stress and then we create the stress internally or externally, then we can relieve the stress. And that's some of the mindfulness practices we work on with breath work. And some of that stuff's in the book and all those exercise and eating right and sleep and all those kind of things. So anyway, I thought that was really helpful is there is no stress. And then the other thing I was listening to, I'm going to do one on this, but it's like, and I don't know, and I'm really curious, and maybe you and I could talk about this more, Bob, but visualizing your depression as this, like a room, like a house. And then when you walk in the front door, well, like, what does the exterior paint look like? What's inside the house? What color is it painted? How is the lighting? What pictures are on the wall? And then this meditation goes through this process of like, well, then let's just go into this one room and we're just going to repaint the wall. What color would you like it to be? And then kind of changing. So from a dark gray to maybe a light blue, that feels a little bit more manageable. And oh, by the way, we're going to put new, shades on that we can open. And so we get a little bit of light in here. And then, oh, there's this picture over here that is some traumatic event. How about we put your kids' birthdays in there and or something, like that. So you go through this visualization process, like really visualizing the reality of your depression or trauma or whatever that is, and then just slowly going in and tweaking the decoration and kind of redecorating that house. And so when I walk in now, well, the light's on over here in the living room. I'm going to go over there for right now because I feel pretty good about that. But anyway, I thought that was a pretty cool little mechanism. So
as you talk about, that depressive state, one thing, so I used to be in it 24/7. It was just part and parcel of who I was, what I was dealing with. And so since my MDMA experience and coming off the antidepressants, I've had probably 3 episodes of depression, and my therapist asked me to kind of journal about, and and it's still hard for me to describe other than kind of just being in that kind of molasses, just didn't feel right. And so she wanted me to kind of write down things that I ate or things that I experienced just before. And it's usually, I've noticed a couple times, it's related to self-imposed stress, things that I'm kind of putting myself under. And then also, kind of when I start to fail at some of the personal improvement I'm trying to do, I think maybe I'm a little bit hard on myself, and that leads to, now, fortunately, these episodes it's episodic. So it only lasts for 2 or 3 days and I'm back out of it.
Yeah.
So, I'm very grateful for that. And part of that is this, like we talked about earlier, being aware, communicating, sharing with my wife. I'm feeling depressed.
Right.
I'm not feeling right. I just don't know what's going on. And just that communication and awareness is so critical. And then I'm able to kind of work through it and back out on top.
Well, there you go. So, and I guess I just want to say too, to people that are listening to this, and Bob, I think you capture this really well as you share these kind of different points, but have a lot of grace and self-forgiveness with yourself, and everybody's on their own journey. Everybody proceeds at their own pace. And I know that we've talked to people and they're trying all these self-help, these healing things, or their therapist, and they don't feel like they're making any progress, and they get disappointed and they beat themselves up and all that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that either. So, this is all about encouragement and finding teammates to help you through this stuff and being graceful and forgiving with yourself, when we kind of fall back, because we do. That's just part of it. I mean, that's like if we look at the recovery world, it's like 3 or 4 steps forward and, at the beginning, certainly 1 or 2 steps back, and then we keep on the process, and then we just keep working through it. So, okay, well, all good.
That's why I gave up my personal privacy, right?
Yeah.
Normally I'm a very private person. Sarah and I enjoy sitting in our, very quiet property way back off the road, and we're just very private. But I decided after writing this book, the only way that this is going to work is if I start talking about my own. And so I'm willing to share my story, but you'll also notice I'm not trying to say, hey, I experienced it, I'm through it, and here I'm on the other side. It is a lifelong journey. and it's work all the way through.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would say that's different is the reward is so great.
Right.
The experience that you can have is so much better, that it's worth every ounce of energy that you put into it. And, you know, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. It doesn't matter because you're taking steps forward. And just those little steps over time are going to add up to, and my hope is that people can experience some of the same types of success that I've had and can really um, experience the most that life has to present for them.
Right. That's really the goal. I mean, reduce veteran suicide, I mean, obviously, and then people being stuck in that molasses or gray, and then finding the joy and the gratitude in the world that offers us those opportunities. So,
Well,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, I want to.
Lou, you look like you're right on the
No,
edge of
not a
another
question really.
question.
I just, I think hearing
Okay.
us talk about like communicating, like when, like the letting off steam, like communicating is the best way to get through it. I have had so many situations personally where I want to communicate. I want to communicate so badly. I want it like in my head, it makes so much sense what I want to say and how I want to say it and what I'm feeling and like what these triggers are. And it's not coming out, And so I think that's when personally for me, like exercise, being in nature, journaling, like if I have to let off steam and I can't communicate or like there is just fire coming from both sides, it's still like communication doesn't have to be the only path, and I guess I just want to offer that. But in learning how to communicate, there was a book that I read. And I know not everybody is in a couple, but I think this applies to different relationships. Like I use this stuff when I communicate with my dad, when I communicate with my family. And for me personally, it just really helps. But it's called Getting the Love You Want. And it's by Harville Hendrix and Helen. And it teaches you like the formula, literally the sentence structure of this is what I'm feeling, like exactly what we were talking about earlier. Like when you do A, it makes me feel B. And then it teaches you how to put this sentence structure together so that, because I think one of the most frustrating things is when I literally just want to be like, Dad, like I'm really mad at you. You're pushing every single one of my buttons. It could just be like how I'm feeling, or there's some other stuck energy in me. But like right now, I need you to get the hell away from, like, get out of my face, like stand back a little bit. And I know that never happens though. Honestly, this is just such a theoretical situation. It never, ever happens.
Yeah.
But there are so many times like when I was growing up, and I think that's, I think about younger Emma, and it's like I had so many things that I wanted to say and like to communicate, and I just couldn't do it. And so I guess I just want to offer that communicating is not always as easy as just opening your mouth and saying.
Well, Emma, so that's one of the actions too on that funnel idea. Being aware, sometimes you need to take the exit,
Yeah.
right? It's not about communicating. It's not about relationship. It's about, hey, I just need to kind of leave.
Right.
And so sometimes leaving and thinking and pondering and, really kind of putting things into perspective is the right thing. So, like you said, for me, at the points where I need it, communication is one of the key tools. But there are many other tools that can be used. Just going somewhere and meditating, going somewhere and walking through the woods changes your mindset, right? It just, so I was a private pilot after I got out of the Air Force. And what I noticed is when I was flying, when I was in the pilot seat, I could think of absolutely nothing else than flying the plane. And so no matter what was going on in the world, I didn't experience it. So flying was a sanctuary to me. And so there's a number of things that you can do. The the real important issue is that you want to change the dynamic and stop heading down the funnel.
Right. Well, so I'm going to throw out, because we're talking about that. And I think when we're talking about it, we're talking about long-term relationships, and maybe it's our generational thing, is like, it's really important for me to communicate that to my spouse in certain situations, because our parts kind of feed off each other sometimes. And you can get stuck in a loop because we've always behaved in a certain way. And if you're trying to break those loops, then some clear communication around how you're breaking the loop and that you're in one or whatever. But I think you're right, Em. Communicating in all situations is not it. I was going to just say, Professor McGee, who joins us in our MVP mindfulness stuff, she's got a thing called STOP, STOP. But S is like when you feel yourself in that trigger, event, situation, whatever. S is for stop, like literally stop. And then the T is take a breath. So like we encourage 3, but you can take 1, but whatever, just to kind of calm the body, calm the mind. And then the O is for observation. So observing, and this is kind of military. I know they have an acronym for it, but you're looking internally about what's going on with me. I'm angry, I'm whatever, name a feeling, whatever a thought. And then externally, what's happening? Well, my boss is a complete dick. I can't stand him. And now he's making me work on the week, whatever it is. And so you're doing all that. And then the P is for proceed, and proceeding consistent with who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world.
Yep.
And so just taking those moments, but having a little toolkit like that and doing that. So it doesn't always mean communicating. It maybe mean just internal review, take a few breaths, going for a walk, going to a yoga class, whatever it may be, and then kind of processing it, and then just really being clear about how you want to show up in that situation. So anyway, but Em, a really good point. I appreciate you saying that, because it's not the same for everybody. And by no means is, there's, like I said, there's a lot of avenues and a lot of pathways to get to this point.
That's why it's important. People aren't going to find healing just by reading Bob Taylor's From Service to Success.
You'll get some,
right?
though. You'll get some.
You'll get some. You're going to get.
Yeah.
Well, you get ideas, but you got to go try them. And then here's what happens. Is like what worked for you in this situation, that may not work for somebody else, but okay, I tried that, but now here's another option. Here's another option. And if you're committed to it and you're trying to unpack the stuff and you're working at it, there are ways to work.
It's just recognizing, to me, it's recognizing that you don't have to do it on your own.
Yeah.
A, you're not alone. B, you're not a highly trained professional at fixing some of this stuff. And like Emma said, it's hard work. It's even harder if you don't know what you're doing. Imagine,
hey, pull your Mercedes in here and let me redo the carburetor.
Yeah.
Are you a mechanic? No, I'm a lawyer, but let me work on the carb.
Let me just jump in an airplane and start flying.
Yeah.
Without being trained. Let's recognize that there's some things in our behaviors and our mindsets that we don't fully understand. And so the biggest message in my book is you're not alone. You don't have to be alone. And there's a path forward. And I don't know if I shared this the last time, but I talked to a therapist and I asked her, I said, so out of everyone that comes to you and you create a care plan and they listen to you and they do the work, how many of them get better? And she said, everyone that does the work, they might not get all better, but everyone experiences an improvement. And I just thought that's 100%. She didn't have an example where someone came to her, where she created a care plan, they did the work. She didn't have an example where they didn't get better.
Right. Yep. Well, okay. Well, we've been going a little while. This is our intro, but I thought this is really powerful stuff. And I think it's still kind of the meat and foundation of the things that you were talking about in the book. You have a couple of things in the book, and we don't really have to hash them. I'd encourage people to kind of look at them. I'm just going to list a couple of these, Bob. If there's anything in particular you thought was super important, as far as that, some other steps toward healing that were listed in the book, some is get moving, exercise and action, service to others, don't isolate, make sure you're intentionally trying to connect with others. And let's see, regulate your nervous system. There's a lot of talk. We've already done that about breath work. And I've listed mindfulness, meditation, and yoga, and then therapy, journal, and group work is in there, all that stuff. And then other kind of broader wellness steps, learning how to do relaxation and stress and anxiety relief. See above, we already talked. You encourage folks to be really careful about how they use alcohol and drugs, obviously, because that can just stir things up and like throwing gas on a fire. And then finding productive, safe ways to blow off steam or release that stress. So, not bypassing things, but embracing those obstacles when you're prepared and able to do so. Healthy diet, sleep, hydration, and recovery. So that's a whole list of stuff. A lot of good wellness pieces in there, and those are things that maybe people kind of hear about.
The one that sticks out to me as you went through those, as I talk to veterans, is the isolation. Do not isolate.
Right.
The reason that it's a really kind of a strange phenomenon with veterans is that everything we do in the military, everything we do is as a member of a team. I can't think of anything that I did strictly on my own. And so everything we do is part of a team. And the thing that we like the most about our military experience is the camaraderie, right?
Yep.
So what I don't understand is when we get out, some of us choose to isolate. And part of that is depression causes us to want to be alone. So I understand that that's part of it. But a lot of guys choose like very solitary type activities like gaming. They go down their basement, they get on, get the game console, and before they know it, they've spent 6 hours in their basement all by themselves, isolated. And they're not out there building a new network, forming their new tribe, building new friendships. Again, as Emma said, guess what? Finding new friends and being in relationships aren't always the easiest paths. It's much easier to be alone.
Right.
But guess what? Being alone is very bad for people.
When you're in that cycle. Yeah.
But being alone for long periods of time is bad no matter what. We are social animals. And that's why, solitary confinement in prisons is not necessarily a good punishment. Right. But we need each other. We need relationships. And so I would just kind of coach people that if you find yourself being isolated, being alone, and that you feel like, gee, I don't feel like being around other people. Well, that's okay to feel that way, but it's not okay to stay that way.
Right.
And so you have to kind of start to do the work. And so one of the things that you can do is just find somebody that you can have a weekly chit chat with. Go to the Starbucks or go to the, breakfast and just spend a half hour together with somebody to talk about what's going on in your life and then listen to what's going on in their life. I wrote an article that was published called Make a Friend, Save a Vet. It kind of talked to, because a lot of people don't know how to help a vet. They don't know how to have a relationship. People say the words, "Thank you for your service." And I've gotten more and more comfortable with hearing that. It used to make me very uncomfortable to hear that. But what really would make a difference is if we started to make friends with veterans. And all that is being consistent. If it's every week, every other week, it's a phone call, it's a, like I said, a chit chat, a breakfast, something. And the most important thing to do is to listen. is to listen to what is going on in that other person's mind. And so I said the one element was isolation. The other is service to others.
Right.
We are better people when we help someone else. We're better people when we help solve problems for other people, and we're better when we help people reach their goals. So, sometimes we kind of get into these, hey, I've got this goal that I want to achieve. I've got this thing that I want to achieve. You probably saw it within your teams, coaches, when someone helped another player get better. That was probably more meaningful for that person, is when they could help elevate someone else and help them to achieve their success. And so that's part of our human condition, is that
Yeah.
we just happen to be better when we're helping people. And
Yeah.
when, if we can find things that we can do to help other people, it's going to make us feel better, and it's going to make us better people.
Well, very well spoken, Bob. So I'm going to give a quick plug for Emerging Vets and Players, so people on our listeners know that we partnered with them for the last couple of years. So Emerging Vets and Players brings former professional athletes and former veterans together. Not former, I guess former active military, but anyway, for that very thing, because people, you lose your team, you lose kind of your mission, you lose all that kind of connectedness. And this is an opportunity to be around people in a very safe way that kind of get where you're coming from and doing all those kind of things. So just a little piece on that. And then, Bob, the thing about mentors and giving and serving back, we have the opportunity, just because with George and the NFL and all that kind of stuff, we've been around, and I've had a chance to talk to a fair number of folks. And a lot of times when we interview players, and we've had a lot of players on over the course of this podcast, one of the things that we like to ask them is like, who helped you make it in the league? Who, when you were a rookie, did you have someone? And almost invariably, all these players who end up being long-term players, they had a vet who pulled them under their wing and explained, hey, look, dude, NFL's a business. Here's the things you got to deal with, or you got to change this about your practice habit, or you got to do this, or you're not quite getting this done. And just talking about how absolutely invaluable, having that relationship and just being kind of steered to get back on course and to stay in that path. And then knowing too that those guys all turn around. I can't remember which player it was, but one of them talked about, sending the elevator back down, or there's a lot of terms for it, but like if somebody helped you and then doing that again. And I think there is a lot of that. It's a real cutthroat kind of thing, because they just made the 53-man roster cuts, and now there's lots and lots of guys out of work. It is brutal. But I think in the most part, most of those locker rooms, there's a lot of that kind of support and nurturing kind of going on. But I think it transcends out of that. And your whole thing made me think, like, we should get a sign-up list and have an orientation for people who want to volunteer, and then have a list by city of where people are at. And if you're interested in being hooked up with a veteran, we could maybe be a resource for that. I don't know. I'm just like pausing on that. But anyway, all good points. Emma, we've been rattling for a bit. Anything you want to kind of add into those pieces?
I do have one. I have actually just being in Japan right now. Dan Buettner works for National Geographic. He's an author, but he did a study on, it's called the Blue Zones. And in Japan, there's one in Okinawa, and a blue zone is when there's like a concentration of centennials, so people living over 100 years old. And one of the major factors in why people live to over 100 years old was because of community. And that when people get isolated or when they're lonely, that's when they get sick, and that's when they die. And just hearing all of this, it just, loneliness is so dangerous. And it just feeds right into that issue of, well, not really the issue, but just like the human condition of putting that stress on ourselves. And so, and just even in thinking in like the psychological way like that, like we live longer when we have people who care about us, but also when we're invested in others, because there's other things to live for, and I've seen some people be like, sometimes it's a dog, sometimes it's a cat, sometimes, it's your friend or like a mentor or mentee situation. But that's another really interesting book on, just, and I guess also just while we're talking about like the different ways that you're kind of like letting off stress and the tools in your tool belt, like I also just want to circle back to, there's this other book that Gabrielle Bernstein wrote, and it's called Happy Days. And it's kind of heavy and sad, but it's her kind of journey through trauma. And, I think as a yogi meditator, very on the spiritual realm of things, I think something that we always talk about is how it's, if you're really stressed, like breathe more or journal or do these things. But sometimes we do need like psychotherapeutic drugs, or you need your depressive medicine, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I
Mm.
guess I just want to offer that is that if that's where you have to start right now and that's what feels best, and you need to have the chemicals in your brain kind of balanced out a little bit more, there are trained professionals who are going to do that and who are going to help you, and then eventually you can kind of take the steps. And Bob, you kind of shared with us part of that journey and getting off of your antidepressants, but there's no right or wrong way to this path to healing. And, I think for anybody listening to this, if you're feeling a little bit lost or you don't know how to befriend a veteran, picking up Bob's book, I think it offers a lot of resources and ideas and tools in different ways to be a branch of healing. And also a lot of different practices so that you can try different things, and it's not just throwing spaghetti at a wall. Like, these are things that have helped other people.
Emma, thank you for pointing that out. And so one of the issues, people sometimes think, oh, from service to success, that's for a veteran. So I'm not a veteran, so I'm not, that book's not for me. And one of the things that, that's not the feedback I'm getting. I'm getting feedback that from people that have read it, that talk to me, say, you know what, there's stuff in there. It doesn't matter if you're a veteran or not. And so I'm very grateful for that feedback. But the other thing is, one of the biggest complaints from a veteran who is struggling is that no one understands. That's probably a
Pretty consistent. Yep.
90% kind of response is they don't understand me. My spouse doesn't understand me. They don't understand me. So that's why I'm isolated, because people don't understand me. Well, one of the things that I'm hopeful is that the book that I wrote can also serve the family members and friends of veterans, so that it at least opens up their mindset to understand a little bit about what the veteran is
Sure.
experiencing. And
Right.
the closer we get into understanding each other, then that creates
Yeah.
the space to have those relationships and the time that we can spend together learning.
Yeah. Very, very true. So, and I think, where the families can learn more are the people, just to understand kind of what is going on. Cause we hear that all the time with the vets, and then they do. I mean, it's a little bit like if you keep putting your hand over the stove and get burnt, you're not going to go near the stove anymore. And I know a lot of vets feel that way with relationships. Like, I've tried dating, or I've tried to talk to them and they don't get it. And it's always blows up in my face. And after a while, it does get that way. And so trying to find small, consistent steps for them to work their way back is what's really, really, really important that way. So we can try
That's
to do that.
that it makes me so sad to hear that, but um, it, hope does not disappoint, right? Um, I am a very hope filled person.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that these veterans that struggle, or the spouses, or the friends, or the girlfriends or boyfriends of veterans, um, can start to understand that there is a path forward, that
Right.
it it doesn't have to, you're not broken. Okay. It's not, this isn't
Mm.
something that is irreparable. It's something that you can recondition yourself. You can start to reprogram yourself. You can get a new paradigm and really start on a path. It won't happen overnight. For me, it happened over years.
Yep.
Uh, but, and like Emma said, it's not necessarily just a psychologist. It could be a psychiatrist. It could be, antidepressants. It could be MDMA. It could be psilocybin. It could be, uh, you know, finding your true passion in life and committing yourself to something that you're helping other people. There are so many paths and so many ways to get improvement that if you will just commit yourself and understand that you're going to have bumps in the road and I always talk about walking down the basement of a hospital and you nail your head in a pipe that's going across. Well, you can't just turn around and walk out. You have to be willing to kind of maybe duck and weave a little bit and find a way through it. But I remain hopeful that seeing some of these veterans and like you said, athletes, people struggle. Life is hard sometimes, but there is a path forward, and there's a way to get through it.
For sure. So I just want to mention the 3 Ps. I don't know if we did on the last one, but the 3 Ps in kind of Buddhist summarized from that is life's not perfect. And so when we set ourselves up to think our family's going to be perfect, our spouse is going to be perfect, we just set ourselves up. Life's not perfect. It's not permanent. So whether it's good or bad, it's going to evolve, change, and shift over time. And so if you're stuck in a bad spot, just stay with it because things do change and evolve. And the third one is it's not personal. Like you said in the early part of this, did they say that because they're trying to do X, Y, to Z to me? And most of the time it's not. Most of the time, all the bullshit people throw at us is because of their own woundedness.
Other people are broken.
They are.
Other people are having struggle.
And I think my greatest motivation for self-healing is that I would eventually get to a point in my life where I do no harm to anybody else, irrespective of how I feel personally in my life. But like if I can go out in the world and serve others and don't ever hurt anybody or inflict pain or trauma on anybody else, it will all have been worth it. And if we can end that, then we can kind of go inside and keep working on ourselves.
Yeah, it's that Hippocratic oath, right? First, do no harm.
Do no harm. And I always feel like that's our responsibility in these relationships, is at least trying to do that. And like, I'm not going to inflict pain on my spouse. I feel like shit, or I'm angry, or whatever that is, but I'm going to trust that she loves me, he or she, whatever. She didn't do this on purpose just to drive me crazy, and that she's trying to be supportive. And therefore, I'm not going to carry this for a week and be angry and not talk, whatever, all that kind of stuff. And so try not to do the harm. So, okay. Well, Bob, thank you. We've done a bunch. I just want one, how would you recommend people, or how can they support your work? And then 2, what's next for you coming on? And we'll relink all of the Bob Taylor connections and websites and links and social medias and all that kind of stuff. Emma's got all that put together. But so how can people support your work? And then anything new and exciting for you? Are you going to be on, you're going to be on some late night show that we should watch? Or are you going to host Saturday Night Live? Or is there a movie coming? When's the movie coming out? Anyway, just checking in. So if there's anything you want to kind of push your stuff, this is the moment.
Sure. So just the blatant promotion. So the way to kind of find out what's going on is at patriotpromise.org.
Right.
We've got our 501c3. We're our big push is that my main goal is to get resources to 100,000 veterans. Part of those resources is a copy of the book. Okay.
Right.
So every book that's purchased, we donate to. If people buy a book, they can donate 5 or 10. And we're already over 3,000 books that we've been able to donate because of the generosity of a number of people. We're also creating a new partnership program for both corporations and for individuals that want to kind of come alongside. And what we're doing, the resources includes kind of a health check. So make sure that, hey, if you need some medical help, we're going to make sure you get it. Also a mental well-being check. So, people might not recognize that they're in need of that mental health care. So, and then we'll do a career exploration, and that's helping veterans find their new passion in life, because it's not just about getting a job. You know, when I left the military, I landed into an R&D engineer role working with my best friend out of college. And I had all kinds of business success, did great things. By all means, I should have been,
Right.
happy as a lark, right? But that wasn't my experience. So, in my opinion, getting a job is only a part of it. Finding someone's passion is really what I'm trying to do for veterans. So, having that kind of career exploration to really explore where they want to go. And then the last part is we're rolling out a certificate program for, you listed off a number of these new life skills: mindfulness, self-forgiveness, um, how we should be thinking, what types of um, breathing exercises should we do. Those are all new life skills that I can tell you that there isn't a Navy SEAL that thinks that they need to learn some of those life skills. But hey, I think some of the greatest athletes out there are learning the value of things like yoga and mindfulness and other things to get their mind right. So we're going to introduce a certificate program that kind of recognize people having gone through the whole program to gain these new life skills. So that's a program that we're getting out. And so I'm looking for individuals and corporations to join us in these partnerships so that we can partner with other 501c3 nonprofits and learn from each other and help each other reach as many people as possible.
Wow. Sounds like a great plan. Like all the bullet points. So that sounds really good, Bob. You are busy, so that's good. And we still got to get you a little bit more hooked up. I know we've introduced you to the executive director for MVP, but I think we really need to get you, the resources there so we can be making referrals of military veterans.
That would be, yeah, I'm trying to be more purposeful. And I think getting behind these moves and selling houses and all that stuff, getting that behind me, I'm trying to be more intentional about some of these partnerships and I am starting to record my own podcasts.
Yeah.
And so I have two people that I'm looking at right now that I'll have to invite onto my podcast. And this is not a 2-month process to get this word out. So I'm in it for the long run.
Right. Well, we look forward to that. And so we're going to link all your stuff up, the Patriot's Promise, so people can search for that and can find it. And I just say that, so we do a donation for everybody that's on the podcast. So I think we'd just like to kind of start and support. So I know George would be super excited to donate $5,000 to the Patriot Promise to help with those books and do a few other things. And so we'll get that kind of set up so our notion can donate to your 501c3.
That would be phenomenal. I can't tell you how much I would appreciate that.
Yep. No, I know that. So you're doing a lot of work. And then if we get to a forgiveness journal, let us know about that. We'd love to help kind of put those pieces together just so we have some additional materials for vets and others to work through on some of these other processes. So
it's a great thing. Right. I love working with you guys.
If we can ever be somewhere and support you or do anything, let us know. We're glad to do it.
I feel very simpatico with you two. I really enjoy our time together. You guys are extremely gracious, warm, welcoming, and I enjoy our conversations tremendously.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bob. It is very mutual, and we're very proud of you for all the things that you're doing. Good luck with the move and all the transitions, and we'll get everything posted up. And I think, are we trying to, is this one going out next week, Emily?
Yep.
We think? Okay. So yeah, because we're going to have 2 weeks back to back of Bob Taylor and Service to Success, so people can get all of their fix for Bob Taylor, and hopefully we'll generate a lot of support and we'll push this out on all of our social medias as well. So that's great. So, Bob, well, let's go with Emma first. Any
I just
final
want to say
words,
thank
Emmy?
you. I'm going through the process, and I appreciate how you keep coming back to it's not a 2-month thing, and it's not something that's going to fix overnight. So just trusting the process, trusting that our body will, welcome in the healing and relax and ease the stress in ways when it's ready, but just to not stop showing up and not give up on yourself. So thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate you being on again.
Well, I'm a big fan of both of you. So I wish you all the success in the world.
All right. And we look forward to seeing Sarah someday. Maybe we'll get her on camera when she gets
Probably not.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. All good then. Well, very good. All right. Well, Bob, thank you. Really appreciate your time again, and hope we did service to the book. But anyway, wish you very well in all of your journeys. And again, let us know how we can support you down the road. So thank you. Blessings.
Thank
All
you.
right. Take care.